next speaker is Mikola KOVALЬЧУK. Mikola graduated from the National Aviation University as an aviation engineer, economist, and a space and air law lawyer. He also received a doctorate of law degree from the Interregional Academy of Personnel Management and is continuing his studies pursuing an MBA through the Edinburgh Business School. Mikola is the managing partner of the law firm L.I.GROUP, and he manages its Kyiv office. He represents many of the largest banks in Ukraine and specializes in the areas of commercial law, bankruptcy, debt collection, and banking. He also is the co-founder of the NGO Legal Initiatives. Please welcome Mikola KOVALЬЧUK.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, the relationship between the Ukraine and the USA are nowadays at a very high level, and the Ukraine is currently on its way toward becoming more like a civilized Western world in general, and to the United States in particular. The first-hand support which has been given to us by the United States, likewise by the Ukrainian diaspora in the USA, is of a paramount importance and therefore cannot be underestimated for the sake of the Ukrainian people. Owing to the consolidation of efforts both on the part of the US and the EU governments with the intentions of the Ukrainian nation to live in a prosperous democratic society, our state has enough forces to resist aggression from Russia, as well as to change our country to the better. The Ukraine possesses a huge potential for its further development, characterized by its following traits, namely, this is a truly civil society with a great power of spirit, which was founded in the course of the Revolution of Dignity. These are hardworking, educated, and talented people. This is favorable geographical location of our state. After all, the Ukraine is a transit point for land, sea, and air. There is a multitude of natural resources. There is a great scientific potential. All of the above-mentioned factors, alongside the reforms initiated by our president and put into effect by the Ukraine's government, will ensure a substantial socio-economical recovery for our state. Please allow me to focus your attention upon the legislative and legal phases of the state reforms. In order to ensure the effective reforms, our state needs fundamental changes of the state governmental structure. Reform in this direction envisions a series of principal steps. Its reduction in the number of officials, optimization of state maintenance, infrastructures and institutions. In 2014, the new government reduced the state services by 25,000 people, whereas it has been scheduled that by the end of 2015, an additional 10% reduction will have been introduced. State control bodies have been reduced by more than a half. At the same time, it is mentioning that the mere reduction in number of officials will not ensure the desired end result in terms of the state service machine's efficient functioning. A civil servant professional background is also quite a crucial item on the agenda. Pursuant to that, an essential factor for the highly professional state apparatus is an employee's financial satisfaction. For instance, a state serviceman's average monthly salary amounts to approximately 175 United States dollars, which, taking into consideration the existing inflation rate, unfortunately can hardly ever provide the average statesman with all the necessary things needed for this continual well-being. In neighboring Poland, for example, a state clerk's average monthly earnings equal $1,150, which is 6.5 times more than in the Ukraine, while an official paycheck in the European Union is near 2,500 United States dollars. As regards the aforesaid material security for the state service reps, which falls under the conditions of the budget restrictions and limitation, external donors' aid would be most welcome. The Ukrainian parliament has been reviewing a bill to be enacted entitled on the state service, which anticipates creation of the appropriate terms and conditions for the state officials decent material security, including the donor's expense, requirements for future state service candidates, as well as formation of the competitive-based procedures designated for assigning a properly selected statesman to an office position. In addition, there have been certain steps made to set up administrative service centers whose activities shall aim at making the entire process less time-consuming. Likewise, at decreasing the level of corruption in the field of state services. Such centers have already been successfully operating in all the regions of our country. Among the top priority challenges facing our state authorities, the issue of restructuring both the fiscal and the banking sectors must be addressed, let alone reforming the tax and budget spheres. In the country's banking domain, the National Bank of Ukraine has taken measures purporting to purify the banking market and to get rid of doubtful banks. As a result, 65 banking institutions have been withdrawn from the market. The parliament has already adopted the law of the Ukraine, which foresees a tangible control of the dubious bank agreements, determined the methodology of establishing such agreements and contracts, outlines the requirements as to the complete and utter exposure of the end owners of such banking establishments, improves and upgrades the bank proprietorship and managerial mechanism of responsibility for forcing the banks to declare bankruptcy and close their business. The above reforms can already boast of the initial, even so by far insignificant outcome, closely tied to investors' interest in the Ukrainian banking reality. Thus, in July this year, 100% of the public joint stock company Astra Bank shares were sold to an American investment company. In accordance with the economic expert's statement, almost 60% of our national economy is hidden away in the shadows. Therefore, it is critical to carry out the reforms in the sphere of taxation. It is worth emphasizing that in terms of the tax reform, things are going on too slowly, at a snail's pace. Despite that, the governmental coalition has openly declared the reduction in tax imposition, total restructuring of the internal revenue authorities, lessening of the tax pressure, with the purpose of taking our economy out of the shadowy shelter to the limelight. All the reforms in this sphere still remain in the form of sheer verbal promises. Parallel to that, certain changes have taken place in the budget sphere. The Ukrainian government has carried out the budget decentralization, which envisions leaving most of the monetary funds in the local budgets. Consequently, the scope of financial resources which left in the disposal of local governmental institutions already this year has grown by 7.5%, and it is 39 billion hryvnias. And this is a substantial stimulation factor for the economic development of local communities. Compliant to its gross domestic product, Ukraine is at a very low level. The 2014 GDP per capita amounted to $2,300 United States dollars, which is on average 5-6 times lower than in the adjacent states such as Poland, Hungary, and Czech Republic. Apart from that, from 12 to 17 million citizens of Ukraine have to seek jobs abroad as a result of striking unemployment levels in their native state. Just these two indexes testify to the outspoken need in the investments and in the urgent changes to be introduced in the state's investment policy. An appropriate legislative background must be in place as soon as possible. The scope of foreign investment as of 2013 amounted to approximately 51 billion United States dollars, according to the Ukrainian Stat Bureau data. Nonetheless, in 2014, the aforesaid index decreased by 23%. The key factor that affected the above parameters concerned the military confrontation in the East. At the same time, in accordance with the Free Business Rating, Ukraine occupies the 162nd place in doing business out of 179 world states. According to the Transparency International Research on Corruption Perception Index, Ukraine is in the 142nd place out of the 175 countries. These very indexes, alongside the military action in the East, influence the investment attractiveness of our state. All the leading experts and positive that the military aggression in Ukraine cannot be considered an obstacle for the reforms, including the one which are being introduced for the purpose of our country's investment image improvement. Ukraine's president and government are acting to overcome the roadblock preventing the investor from the participation in the economic life of our country. Thus, our president has summoned the National Reform Council, which involved foreign specialists and which has been entrusted with the investment policy generalization, in the framework of which experts develop certain reforms and put them into operation. Also, the president has created an investment window which is expected to facilitate all the regulatory and normative procedures investors are put through. This is a vital tool for their activities within the boundaries of Ukraine. The Ministry of Economy has come up with an international arbitration in Ukraine, meant for protection of incoming foreign investments. A series of legal acts and bylaws was adopted in order to ease business setup stages. A great many of the licensing procedures and control organization were cancelled. In its concept of the economic development, the country's authorities are challenged with the task of implementing the most fundamental reforms by the year 2020, namely anti-corruption reform, court, law enforcement, taxation, energy, constitutional, agricultural, decentralization, state administration and national security, health protection, education, state proprietorship management, financial deregulation, and the reform of the state purchases. Not long time ago, on July 13th, 2015, with the assistance of the US government, the first in history Ukrainian-American Investment Business Forum was held in Washington. The forum in question demonstrated the investors' high interest in the assets available, subject to privatization this year, as well as the interest in diverse business-related spheres in general. In addition, beginning in January 2016, the free trade zone with the European Union states is supposed to come into being, which shall definitely favor and stimulate the competitive edge of the Ukrainian products and their entrance to EU markets. The Ukraine is a state with the Magdeburg Charter traditions, where communities are defined as a self-sustainable entities from the viewpoint of the local administration. In compliance with the internal consensus, which is to ensure the conditions for the development of territorial units, our president has suggested changes to be made to Constitution in terms of power decentralization. The above changes envision transition of a more executive authority to the local governmental bodies, which in their turn shall be formed on the basis of elections. Besides, with the purpose of avoiding manifestation of separatism, as well as to carry out control over on-site obedience by Constitution, the prefects component shall be added to the governmental structure. Prefects are going to be appointed exclusively by the president. Such a balance between the state and local administrative structures shall act as the guarantee for the successful development of the Ukrainian regions. The changes offered to Constitution have been approved by the Venice Committee and obtained an unanimous acclaim on the part of the Ukraine's constitutional court. European administrative structures, international and national experts, as well as the entire society agree that one of the most important assignments of the state, with the purpose of human rights protection, defense of foreign investors, guarantee for the proprietorship rights, will be gaining the upper hand over corruption in the judicial branch of the power. On this issue, the state authorities have adopted a series of legal acts which aim to introduce reforms in the judicial system to establish foundation for its total independence. In particular, the order of the Supreme Judicial Council formation has been drastically altered. this organization is commissioned to appoint and suspend the courts of law, which in fact foresees the competitive selection of nominees. The latter is expected to raise the level of Supreme Judicial Council, whose major part is to be made up by the judicial authorities. Separate legal provisions strictly demand a more qualitative selection of candidates who are going to run judges' offices for their own. Recertification mechanisms for judges are considered part and parcel of the program under review. This will act as a powerful tool for purification of the judicial system and cleaning of any corrupt stuff. At the same time, it is worth pointing out that the judicial branch of the power leaves much to be desired. Therefore, a lot of things are to be done there. In particular, it is necessary to provide the independent membership of the Supreme Judicial Council, moved forward exclusively by the local governmental institution. It is also crucial to optimize the court system of Ukraine. In particular, in the civil expert's opinion, it is worthwhile rejecting the involvement of the double appeal ruling, etc. Not less important in reforming the state is restructuring of the law enforcement and surveillance organs. There are laws adopted in Ukraine according to which there will be the transparent competitive selection procedure of attorneys and public prosecutors. The number of attorneys and public prosecutors' offices have been substantially reduced. It was advisable that such measures and a tender for contracts had been introduced prior. Then, there is a national police working in the Ukraine. They will soon replace such services as the militia patrols, as well as the state traffic police throughout the country. The government and the parliament plan to adopt a bylaw of the Interior Ministry basic restructuring, in accordance with which the law enforcement and surveillance bodies are going to act in full compliance with the applicable European standards. An extremely important step in the struggle against corruption is establishing of Anti-Corruption Bureau in Ukraine, which intends to investigate corruption-related crimes. It would be quite interesting to come to know that the head of the above bureau was elected publicly as a result of an open and public tender. At present, the bureau management seeks detectives so that in the near future, this authority will begin its work. It is of extraordinary significance for the country that it really is independent and highly effective. In conclusion, I wish to say that all that has been done so far is associated with the steps needed or which are still going to be made in terms of the development of our country. However, it should be duly noted that these steps are sometimes too slow and very painful. The Ukrainian people's desire to live in a flourishing European state is another great force that keeps us going. It makes the Ukrainian government put the reforms into effect and build a competitive economic and political environment, despite the resistance on the part of the old state-maintained corruption system. This is only the beginning, and there is no turning back, only upwards and onwards. Thank you for your valuable attention.